I never imagined my marriage would become a prison. When I first met Jessica, she was everything I wanted. Smart, beautiful, and we shared the same dreams of building a life together. Our first months were filled with passion and promises, but after saying I do, everything changed. Jessica suddenly had no interest in physical intimacy. Not only that, she expected me to live the rest of my life in a completely sexless marriage because she unilaterally decided that was best. I was trapped between my vows and my happiness. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you have ever felt your needs did not matter in a relationship. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. I met Jessica at a friend's barbecue in downtown Seattle on a rare, sunny day in April. I was 32 and had been focused on my career as a software engineer at a growing tech company. Dating had taken a back seat for a while, but something about Jessica immediately caught my attention. It was not just her striking blue eyes or her contagious laugh. She had this way of making everyone around her feel special, including me. We bonded over our similar upbringings in small Midwestern towns before both moving to the West Coast to pursue our careers. Jessica worked in marketing for a major retail corporation, and her ambition matched my own. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant overlooking Puget Sound. We talked for hours about everything from our career goals to our shared dream of having a family someday. During our dating period, Jessica was affectionate and passionate. Our connection felt genuine and deep on every level. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I thought. When we disagreed, we found compromises. When one of us had a bad day, the other was there with unwavering support. Physical intimacy was natural and mutual, an important expression of our growing love. After 18 months of dating, I knew Jessica was the one. I planned an elaborate proposal during a weekend trip to San Francisco. I rented a small sailboat at sunset, hired a photographer to secretly capture the moment, and got down on one knee as the Golden Gate Bridge glowed orange in the background. The joy in her eyes when she said yes made me feel like the luckiest man alive. Our wedding day 6 months later was everything we had dreamed of. 120 guests, a beautiful ceremony at a historic hotel, and a reception that went late into the night. I remember looking at Jessica during our first dance, thinking how fortunate I was to have found someone who seemed to love me completely for who I was. If only I had known what was coming, perhaps I would have seen the warning signs. The first 6 months of our marriage were genuinely happy. We traveled to Thailand for our honeymoon, spending 2 incredible weeks exploring ancient temples and relaxing on pristine beaches. When we returned home, we threw ourselves into creating our life together. We purchased our first home, a charming craftsman, in a family-friendly neighborhood, with good schools for the children we planned to have. We spent weekends painting walls, shopping for furniture, and turning our house into a home. In the evenings, we would cook dinner together, share stories about our day, and plan our future. Jessica seemed as invested as I was in building a strong foundation for our marriage. We talked about starting a family within a year or two once we felt more settled. Our careers were both flourishing. I had recently been promoted to senior software engineer, while Jessica was excelling in her role as marketing manager. We supported each other professionally, celebrating wins and providing comfort after difficult days. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. Friends often commented on how well we complemented each other. I had always believed that a healthy marriage required open communication, mutual respect, and physical and emotional intimacy. Jessica and I seemed to have all of these elements in place. I felt secure in our relationship and excited about our future together. Little did I know that the person I thought I knew so well was harboring a secret that would fundamentally change everything between us. Around 8 months into our marriage, I began to notice subtle changes in our relationship. The most obvious was Jessica's gradual withdrawal from physical intimacy. At first, it was easy to dismiss. She would mention being tired after long days at work or stress about an upcoming presentation. These seemed like reasonable explanations, and I wanted to be understanding. I did my best to be supportive during what I assumed was a temporary phase. I took on more household responsibilities to lighten her load. I listened attentively when she talked about work pressures. I respected her space and tried not to take the rejections personally, though they were becoming more frequent and started affecting my self-esteem. After several weeks of this pattern, I finally brought it up during a quiet dinner at home. I approached the subject gently, emphasizing that I was concerned about our connection, not just the physical aspect of our relationship. To my surprise, Jessica became immediately defensive, accusing me of being insensitive to her needs and only caring about sex. Her reaction left me confused and hurt. This was not the woman I had dated and married who had always been able to discuss difficult topics calmly. Something had changed, but I could not put my finger on what exactly. The strangest part was that in other aspects of our life, things seemed normal. We still enjoyed movie nights and dinners with friends. We still talked about our future plans. It was as if this one crucial component of our marriage had suddenly become off-limits for discussion. As weeks turned into months with no improvement, I decided to take action to reconnect with my wife. I planned surprise date nights at her favorite restaurants. I bought tickets to shows she had mentioned wanting to see. I even organized a weekend getaway to a luxury winery resort in Napa Valley, hoping that a change of scenery might help us rediscover our intimacy. The trip to wine country was a disaster. After a day of wine tasting and a romantic dinner, I attempted to initiate intimacy back in our hotel room. Jessica not only rejected me, but recoiled as if my touch repulsed her. When I tried to talk about it, she burst into tears, saying I was ruining our vacation by pressuring her. I spent the night on the small sofa in our hotel room, feeling like a stranger to the woman I had married. What hurt even more than the rejection was Jessica's growing discomfort with even basic physical affection. Hugs became brief and mechanical. Kisses were quick pecks if they happened at all. She would tense up if I put my arm around her while watching TV. I began to wonder if there was something wrong with me if I had somehow become unattractive to my own wife. When I gently suggested we might benefit from seeing a marriage counselor, Jessica immediately shot down the idea. There was nothing wrong with our marriage, she insisted. The problem was my unreasonable expectations. If I truly loved her, I would stop making such a big deal about this one aspect of our relationship. Her dismissal of counseling was the first red flag I should have taken more seriously. After a year of marriage, the truth finally emerged during an argument that started over something trivial, but quickly escalated to the real issue simmering beneath the surface. Jessica made a shocking admission that left me questioning everything about our relationship. She confessed that she had never really enjoyed physical intimacy. Not with me, not with anyone. The passionate woman I had dated had been playing a role she thought necessary to secure our relationship. She had hoped that once we were married, I would eventually outgrow my physical needs, or at least stop expecting her to fulfill them. I sat in stunned silence as she explained this as matter-of-factly as if she were discussing a change in dinner plans. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Every intimate moment we had shared during our dating relationship, every time I thought we were expressing our love for each other, had been a calculated act on her part. When I finally found my voice, I asked why she had not been honest with me before we got married. Her response was equally stunning. She said she feared I would not have married her if I had known the truth, and she wanted the stability and companionship of marriage. She genuinely loved me. She claimed just not in the way I had believed. The most painful part was her expectation that this should not be that big of a deal if I truly loved her. She seemed genuinely puzzled by my sense of betrayal. In her mind, the deception was justified, because the end result was our marriage, which she valued for every reason, except the one I now felt had been a lie. In the following weeks, Jessica made her position crystal clear: our marriage would be completely sexless from that point forward. This was not a negotiation or a temporary situation. This was her final decision about how our relationship would function for the rest of our lives. She presented it as if she were simply defining a new household rule, like a decision to become vegetarian or adopt a pet. When I suggested we seek professional help through counseling, she refused. When I asked if there might be medical reasons for her aversion that could be addressed, she accused me of trying to pathologize her normal feelings. Every attempt at compromise was met with a brick wall of resistance. The manipulation began in earnest. Jessica would say things like, "If you really loved me, you would not need this physical validation." She framed my basic desire for intimacy as a character flaw, a sign of emotional immaturity, or even an addiction. She portrayed herself as the more evolved partner who had moved beyond such base needs. Things escalated when Jessica involved her family in our private marital issues. She called her parents and sister, telling them a carefully edited version of our situation. Soon I was receiving concerned calls and emails from her family members, all urging me to be more understanding of Jessica and to accept the marriage on her terms. Her father even took me aside at a family gathering to tell me that real men do not pressure their wives. When in desperation, I suggested that perhaps we could consider an open arrangement where I could meet my needs elsewhere while maintaining our emotional relationship, Jessica exploded with accusations of betrayal. She made it clear that she expected complete fidelity to a relationship that would never include physical intimacy again. In her view, I should be satisfied with companionship alone, despite having entered the marriage with very different expectations. The situation grew increasingly toxic as Jessica began telling our mutual friends about our issues, painting me as obsessed, and her as the victim of my unreasonable demands. She would make comments in social settings that made me appear selfish or overly focused on sex. These tactics effectively isolated me from our social circle, as friends naturally sympathized with her portrayal of the situation. I began to question my own perceptions and feelings. Was I being unreasonable? Was physical intimacy really such a small part of marriage that I should be able to live without it? The constant gaslighting eroded my confidence and self-worth. I found myself apologizing for having normal desires and needs. Jessica refused to discuss the issue further. She would shut down any conversation with, "This topic is closed permanently." If I persisted, she would accuse me of harassment or emotional abuse. I felt trapped in an impossible situation, caught between my vows and my deteriorating mental health. In secret, I started seeing a therapist, desperate for objective feedback on my situation. The therapist helped me see that what I was experiencing was a form of emotional manipulation, and that my desires for a complete marriage that included physical intimacy were entirely normal and healthy. This validation was the first step in reclaiming my sense of self. As our second anniversary approached, I barely recognized myself anymore. The confident, optimistic man who had proposed on that sailboat had become anxious, depressed, and constantly walking on eggshells. I had lost weight, was having trouble sleeping, and had withdrawn from hobbies and activities I once enjoyed. Friends who had not seen me in a while commented on how different I seemed, though they did not know the reason why. My work performance began to suffer as I struggled to concentrate. I turned down social invitations to avoid the awkwardness of being around Jessica in public, where she maintained the facade of the perfect wife while I knew the reality at home. I felt increasingly isolated and alone despite being married. The situation reached a breaking point when I discovered Jessica had been sharing deeply private details about our marriage with her family. I overheard a phone conversation where she was telling her sister that I was emotionally unstable and possibly needed medication because I could not accept the reality of our marriage. She described me as shallow and sex-obsessed, completely misrepresenting my desire for a normal, intimate relationship. When confronted about this betrayal of privacy, Jessica delivered her ultimate ultimatum: accept this sexless marriage forever, or I would be proving myself selfish and shallow. She made it clear that if I left, she would make sure everyone knew it was because I valued sex over love, positioning herself as the victim of my base desires. That night alone in our guest room, where I had been sleeping for months, I had a moment of clarity. I deserved basic respect and consideration in my marriage. I deserved honesty. I deserved a partner who valued all aspects of connection, not just the ones that suited her. And most importantly, I deserved the opportunity to find happiness, even if that meant making the painful decision to end my marriage. 3 months after my moment of clarity, I finally gathered the courage to confront Jessica. I had spent weeks preparing what I wanted to say, consulting with my therapist, and strengthening my resolve. I chose a calm Saturday morning when we would both be rested and have time to talk without interruptions. I sat Jessica down in our living room, and with a steadiness in my voice that surprised even me, I laid out my feelings. I talked about mutual respect and the importance of honesty in marriage. I explained that love should involve care for your partner's happiness and well-being, not just your own comfort. I emphasized that I was not asking her to change who she was, but rather acknowledging that perhaps we were fundamentally incompatible. Jessica sat silently throughout my carefully prepared speech. When I finished, I expected tears, anger, or perhaps even a willingness to compromise. Instead, what I received was far more devastating. A cold smile spread across her face as she revealed the truth that had been hiding beneath the surface of our entire conflict. "You want to know the real reason I do not want intimacy with you?" she asked, with a calmness that chilled me. "I actually enjoy knowing you want something you cannot have. There is a certain power in watching you beg for affection and then denying it. Why would I give that up?" Her words hit me like a physical blow. This was not about different needs or even her personal aversion to intimacy. This was about control, about power, about deliberately keeping me in a state of emotional deprivation for her satisfaction. In that moment, the last shred of hope I had for our marriage disintegrated. I was not in a relationship with someone who simply had different needs. I was in a relationship with someone who took pleasure in my suffering. That revelation became my turning point. The next day, while Jessica was at her weekly brunch with friends, I contacted a divorce attorney. The consultation was both terrifying and liberating. The attorney listened sympathetically to my situation and assured me that I had grounds for divorce based on fraudulent representation before marriage. She outlined the process, the potential challenges, and what I could expect financially. I began meticulously documenting the emotional abuse and manipulation. I saved text messages where Jessica admitted to never intending to have a physical relationship after marriage. I recorded dates and details of significant conversations. I created a timeline of how the situation had evolved and impacted my mental health. This documentation would prove invaluable in the coming months. Knowing that financial entanglement often keeps people in unhealthy relationships, I took steps to secure my independence. I opened a separate bank account. I reviewed our assets and debts. I created a budget for living on my own. These practical steps gave me confidence that I could survive the transition to single life despite the emotional and financial cost of divorce. One evening after Jessica had gone to bed, I sat at my desk and wrote out what I deserved in a relationship: respect, honesty, mutual care, physical and emotional connection. The simple act of acknowledging these basic rights helped counteract years of gaslighting that had made me question whether my needs were valid. With my resolve strengthening, I reached out to old friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. A college roommate, a former coworker, my cousin who had always been more like a brother. Their immediate support reminded me that I was not alone in the world. They helped me see my situation with clarity and validated my decision to leave a relationship that had become toxic. After weeks of preparation, both practical and emotional, I was ready to take the final step. On a Tuesday evening after we had both returned from work, I calmly informed Jessica that I wanted a divorce. I had expected anger, but what I got was far more calculated. In an instant, Jessica transformed from the cold, controlling person she had been in private to a sobbing victim. Tears flowed as she accused me of abandoning her. How could I be so cruel? How could I throw away our marriage over something so trivial? Did our vows mean nothing to me? I remained calm, having anticipated this reaction. When her tears did not move me, she escalated by immediately calling her parents, putting them on speakerphone to create an audience for her performance. Her mother began berating me, while her father threatened vague legal consequences for breaking their daughter's heart. It was a coordinated attack designed to make me back down. But I had prepared for this, too. I simply stated that my decision was final, that this was between Jessica and me, and that I would be staying with a friend until I found an apartment. Then I picked up the bag I had packed that morning and walked out the door to my car where my old college roommate Mike was waiting to drive me to his guest room. The weight that lifted from my shoulders as we drove away from the house was indescribable. That first night in Mike's guest room was a strange mixture of grief, relief, fear, and hope. I grieved for the marriage I had thought I had and for the years I had lost. I felt relief at finally taking action to free myself. I feared the uncertain future and the difficult process ahead. But most of all, I felt hope that I might someday find authentic love with someone who valued all aspects of connection. Jessica's public meltdown began the very next day. She posted a vague but clearly targeted message on social media about being abandoned in her time of need. She did not specify what that need was, of course, but the post received dozens of sympathetic comments. Friends who only knew her version of events reached out to ask why I was being so heartless. Within days, Jessica escalated her campaign. She showed up at my workplace, creating a scene in the lobby that required security intervention. She left tearful voicemails claiming she could not live without me. She sent emails alternating between vicious attacks on my character and desperate pleas for reconciliation. The emotional whiplash was exactly what I had experienced throughout our marriage, just now on public display. The most telling moment came 3 weeks after I moved out. Jessica showed up at Mike's house, somehow having gotten his address. When he let her speak to me on the porch, she made a shocking offer. She would reconsider her stance on intimacy if I would just come home. The fact that she could suddenly reconsider something she had previously presented as a fundamental and unchangeable aspect of herself confirmed everything I needed to know. This had never been about her natural preferences, but about control and manipulation. Rather than feeling tempted by her offer, I felt vindicated in my decision. I calmly told her that it was too late for such negotiations, and that I had seen too clearly the unhealthy dynamics of our relationship to ever go back. As Mike escorted her off the property, I felt another piece of my old self returning, the part that knew I deserved better than conditional love used as a bargaining chip. The divorce process proved to be every bit as challenging as my attorney had warned, but in ways I had not anticipated. Jessica used every tactic available to drag out proceedings, from repeatedly firing and hiring new attorneys to claiming sudden medical emergencies before important hearings. What should have taken months stretched into a full year of legal battles. Throughout this time, I maintained my composure and dignity. I refused to engage in public disputes or respond to her social media provocations. When mutual friends asked for my side of the story, I simply said that marriages sometimes end when fundamental expectations do not align, and left it at that. This restraint often surprised those who had heard Jessica's dramatic version of events. Gradually, the truth began to emerge. Friends who initially sided with Jessica started to notice inconsistencies in her story. Her excessive reactions and inability to move forward raised questions about her portrayal of me as the villain. People who had known us as a couple remembered how I had become increasingly withdrawn during our marriage, a change that now made sense to them. Jessica's family remained firmly in her corner, continuing to send me hurtful messages and even threatening to contest the divorce on various groundless claims. My attorney assured me these were empty threats, designed to intimidate me into offering a more generous settlement. Standing firm against this pressure was one of the hardest but most important aspects of reclaiming my agency. The mediation sessions were particularly difficult. Sitting across from Jessica, watching her alternate between tears and cold anger, tested my resolve. She would bring up completely fabricated instances of mistreatment, forcing me to defend myself against events that never happened. Her final attempt at manipulation was offering to accept a minimal settlement if I would agree to a reconciliation period, an offer that confirmed she still did not understand the fundamental reasons for our divorce. After 12 exhausting months, I finally signed the divorce papers. The financial cost had been significant, but the emotional freedom was worth every penny. As I left the courthouse that day, I felt like I could take a full breath for the first time in years. The relief of knowing I would never again have to justify my basic needs or apologize for my natural desires was overwhelming. The process of healing began in earnest once the legal battles ended. Weekly therapy sessions helped me understand how I had ended up in such an abusive relationship despite considering myself a strong, independent person. I learned about the subtle progression of emotional manipulation and how it can affect even the most self-aware individuals. My therapist helped me recognize that the shame I felt was not mine to carry. I had not failed at marriage. I had been misled into a relationship built on false pretenses. This perspective shift was crucial in moving forward without bitterness or fear of future relationships. I rediscovered interests and hobbies that had fallen by the wayside during my marriage. I joined a local hiking group, started playing basketball again with old friends, and even took cooking classes. These activities not only filled my time but reconnected me with the person I had been before Jessica, someone with passions and curiosity about life. New friendships formed naturally through these activities, relationships built on shared interests rather than obligation or history. I was careful to establish healthy boundaries from the beginning, something I had failed to do in my marriage. I became more attuned to red flags in relationships of all kinds, not just romantic ones. Perhaps most importantly, I learned to recognize my own worth independent of anyone else's validation. The constant rejection and gaslighting in my marriage had eroded my self-esteem to the point where I questioned my most basic needs and feelings. Rebuilding that internal foundation took time, but proved to be the most valuable part of my recovery. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I met someone through my hiking group. We started as friends, hiking together and occasionally grabbing coffee afterward. The relationship developed slowly and organically, built on honesty from the very beginning. When I eventually shared my marriage experience, her empathy and understanding confirmed that healthy relationships do exist. Though it took me nearly 2 years to fully process what happened in my marriage, I eventually reached a place of peace. I no longer harbor resentment toward Jessica, recognizing that whatever led her to behave as she did likely stems from her own unresolved issues. My focus instead remained on ensuring I never again compromise my well-being for someone else's comfort. The most profound lesson from my experience was understanding that love should never require the sacrifice of your authentic self. True partnership enhances rather than diminishes both people. Compatibility in fundamental areas is not a luxury but a necessity for a healthy relationship. And perhaps most importantly, honesty from the beginning is the only foundation upon which trust can truly be built. I sometimes think about the man I was when I first met Jessica, full of hope and dreams for our future together. While that naive optimism is gone, it has been replaced with something more valuable: wisdom, self-respect, and the courage to choose happiness, even when the path to it is difficult. If my story can help even one person recognize and leave a manipulative relationship, then the pain I experienced will have served a greater purpose. Have you ever been in a relationship where your needs were consistently dismissed or where you felt manipulated? What were the signs you noticed and how did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about overcoming relationship challenges. Remember that you deserve a relationship built on mutual respect and honesty. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to choose happiness, whatever that looks like for you.